everybody, and welcome to Mentorship with Purpose, brought to you by Discovery. Today, we kick off an incredible week, a week that's going to be filled with leadership insights and inspiration. We're going to learn, we're going to discover new ways of thinking and doing so that we go back to our organizations with a revived and refreshed mind. Welcome once again. Through its values, its culture, its programs, and partnerships, Discovery has become a force for good in society. And Discovery as a force for good has been even more evident throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, as we saw its leaders supporting government with various initiatives to ensure that South African citizens are vaccinated. And here we find ourselves in level 4, still forging ahead through this pandemic. And being a force for good is also at the heart of this week-long event, Mentorship with Purpose Week, which seeks to enhance leadership qualities amongst beneficiaries by sharing knowledge and expertise on leadership, and more specifically, leadership in crisis and innovating through crisis. The team at Discovery has actually added a really fun yet really important element to the week. We have a special participant joining us today, and they're here to oversee a unique challenge that involves all of us. Discovery is aiming to establish a Guinness World Record for the greatest number of people dialed into a leadership coaching session. And we could set this world record. Just imagine that. In fact, our very special guest is the Guinness World Record adjudicator, who is in attendance, and they're here to observe this process. And what we're asking you to do is to help us set a world record for the most number of pledges received for a mentoring campaign within a 24-hour period. And that effort starts now. So there is a link. There's a link that we're placing on our screen, and it's available as well on Discovery's various social media platforms. All you have to do is click on that link, follow the steps, and that's where you're able to pledge your commitment to pay it forward and mentor an individual in your personal capacity. And remember that we make a living by what we get, but we actually make a life by what we give. So give your time. We're asking you to lend an ear, to shine a light, to share how you got here with someone else so that they can discover what truly lies within them. That's what mentorship is about, helping other people ignite their full potential. And you can do so by pledging and making a commitment so that we can indeed achieve this Guinness World Record within 24 hours. It would be quite a feat and a lovely highlight to this week. And then besides establishing the record today, Mentorship with Purpose is a long-term program where Discovery executives and team partners, certain leaders that they partner with and leaders within the organization, within teams, come together to strengthen leadership capabilities among CSI support organizations. And there is just so much that we're going to be talking about this week that we hope will be of benefit to you. But first, I would like for us to hear from the founder and the group chief executive of Discovery. That's Adrian Gore. Here he is with a special message.
Hi, it's Adrian Gore. I want to tell you that I'm very, very excited about our Mentorship for Purpose program, and I urge you to get involved. There is a real opportunity to break a world record for the number of pledges that we get, and that's, I think, very exciting and a lot of fun. But I think at a much deeper level, we have a real opportunity to make a difference. Our value of force for good demands that we make an impact on our country and in the societies in which we operate, and this is a great opportunity to do that. You know, the research shows that in building an organization, building a business, building a charity, there's no greater way to help than to be a mentor. Mentorship is a fundamental way to transfer skills and to help those entities grow and succeed, and that has a massive network effect. I think we often think about things in a linear way. You know, I help one other and that, you know, that's the end of it. It doesn't work that way. There's kind of a flywheel, a network effect that happens. Those skills are transferred to charity or within our stakeholder group, and that's transferred in addition to who they help, and so on and so on, and slowly you turn a flywheel and you get the economy moving. And so that's how economies are built. That's how economic growth works. It's not linear. It really is a network and exponential. And so this is a great opportunity because we have the skills at scale to make a difference. And this program is about that. So please get involved. I think you'll find it fantastic fun. I think you'll find it at a personal level gratifying. And making a difference is obviously the most important thing in a very deep way for all of us.
And thank you so much to Adrian Gore, especially when you talked about the network effect of mentorship. I mean, this week is a great example as well of how Discovery uses the skills and the capacity that it has at scale as a force for good through mentorship rather. And anyone who's heard Adrian speak know that he is absolutely optimistic. He is so hopeful about the potential of this country. And this is indeed one of those efforts that allows for that potential to come alive. So we've got an incredible week ahead, not just this session, but incredible week, a couple of amazing 4 days lie ahead. This is where you'll find Discovery executives hosting masterclasses, and they will be joined by external subject matter experts. And they will be coming together to give you masterclasses. They will be giving generously to us their knowledge and their expertise. And so make sure that you curate your program and you make the most out of the 4 days ahead. So let's speak to one such leader as we kick off, and that is Barry Schwartzberg. Barry is an actuarial science and mathematical statistician. In 1990, he was admitted as a fellow of the Faculty of Actuaries in Edinburgh, and then he was admitted as an associate of the Society of Actuaries in Chicago. He's the co-founder of Discovery Limited, and he's played numerous roles over the years. He was instrumental in establishing Discovery Health's marketing, distribution, and operational functions, first as its chief marketing officer and then as its chief operating officer. He then served as CEO for a number of years. And during that time, he established the company's first low-income medical scheme. And Barry also served as the group's executive director responsible for Discovery strategy and new business development. And this is when he initiated Discovery's strategy to launch a retail bank, which we now, of course, has been realized as Discovery Bank. He helped start Discovery Insure. He secured the shareholding in Ping An Health and also established the first insurance partnership with AIA and established Vitality USA. Well, he now serves as the CEO of the Vitality Group, and he sits on the boards of Discovery Limited, Discovery Health, Discovery Insure, Vitality South Africa, Vitality Group in the US, and Ping An Health in China. Well, Barry, this is just but a summary of your career. And all I have to say is, what a career. I'm just struck by how many innovative and groundbreaking efforts you've been a part of. Welcome. It's really great to have you with us.
It's fantastic to be here this morning. So I'm looking forward to the week. You know, mentorship is so important. Leadership, I think, is important. I think people can make a difference, you know. Just one person can make a significant difference. So it's great to be here.
Wonderful. And now that you've said that, now I'm curious about some of the mentors that you've had. Who, just maybe one or two people who've been instrumental in helping you, in mentoring you and driving your career to this degree?
I've had many mentors in my career, but two that really changed the trajectory of my career was firstly, you know, when I started my career, I worked at another insurance company, Liberty Life, and I worked for Herschel Mayers, who many years later came to work for Discovery. And he gave us the permission to sort of innovate and to become entrepreneurs within an organization. It's not typically thought of that, you know, that way. A lot of people think entrepreneurs are individuals that start a business independently, but sometimes entrepreneurs are within an organization, you know, entrepreneurship. And Herschel gave me that permission, and actually myself and Adrian gave us that permission to become, you know, entrepreneurs within an organization. And really our careers developed from there. It was you know, he inspired us, he mentored us to take that chance, and you know, we took it with both hands, you know, and you know, our careers developed from there. So that's one person that was been a very strong mentor, certainly early on in my career. And then when we started Discovery, Adrian and I started Discovery, our chairman at the time, and in fact, the person who really gave us the funding initially was Laurie Dippenaar. And he really mentored us initially on how to build a business, with the right ethics and the right thinking. And the way he operated was really inspirational. And we learned so much from him over those years, those initial 15 years of Discovery. He really helped us form the essence of Discovery and the way we operated, and our ethics and our culture and our value system. Really, a lot of it was due to his influence.
Incredible. And I guess that flywheel effect and the benefit to society that Adrian was talking about earlier is actually realized in the organization that you both founded. But if we talk about CSI, it's a wonderful way to give expression to the values of being an organization that works for good. You're the chair of the Discovery Fund, which is focused on strengthening and improving health systems. We are at level 4. The president announced yesterday these restrictions in order to save lives. So tell us a little bit about the work that you do as part of the fund in relation to being of benefit to society from a health perspective.
So yeah, we started the Discovery Fund almost, 28 years ago. And we started effectively when we started the company. We always had the feeling that we had to give back to society, that we couldn't operate in a healthcare funding system without looking at ways of making it mean something to the broader society. It couldn't just be about us and our clients, but we had to do something for the broader society. So really, from when we started, we set up this fund. It wasn't about the codes, and we didn't do it for that reason. We did it for the reason of we felt we had to do something positive and be a force for social good right from when we started the company. And I was fortunate enough to be part of it right then from the beginning. I've sat on the fund for years, and we've done some phenomenal things over the years with the Discovery Fund. It really has been inspirational. As I said, small things can make a massive difference, and driven people can really do unbelievable things. I mean, we started funding, people, educating them for becoming medical doctors in areas where there weren't any medical doctors in South Africa, in like small towns and small villages where local kids out of that community started studying medicine and actually work in that environment today. So we've done a lot of unbelievable things over the years. It's really actually been inspirational to be part of the fund and do things that are outside purely, profit motive, etc., just to give back to society and allow, if you find in these NGOs, phenomenal people that are dedicated, want to do something positive for society, and to enable them, to enable them to do their work and to, also put structures in place, help them think through the leadership structures and the management structures. How do they raise funds, and how do they govern their NGO, and all these kinds of things, just to be part of that. Obviously we didn't ever deliver any healthcare ourselves, but we helped them think it through and improve the governance, improve the funding, improve the management of the fund, and assist them financially. And we've had phenomenal partners over many years through the Discovery Fund.
Yeah. It's just so encouraging to hear the support that is there for NGOs, because they often fill the gap between society and where government is unable to reach. And that is often the work of the NGOs, supported by private organizations such as Discovery. But the other side of this is that you talked about entrepreneurs or entrepreneurship and your journey. Entrepreneurship is an incredibly difficult path. How do you support and help enterprises and potential suppliers, in fact, who want to grow, who also want to become massive corporations that contribute to society?
Look, I do agree with you that entrepreneurs do make a massive difference. Anyone starting their own business and employing people and doing it for the right reason, long-term, trying to create long-term value, it's so important for society. Whether it is a small business or medium-sized enterprise or companies that are scaling up. For me, that is really the engine that grows the economy. And you go to certain countries around the world and you see micro entrepreneurs, small businesses where people do it on by themselves, really sustains an economy. So it's so important to support entrepreneurship. Oftentimes people say, listen, they're not prepared to support an entrepreneur, in a village or in a town because all the money goes to them or whatever. But entrepreneurs need to be supported wherever they are. They are the engine that creates the value, in an area, hiring people, employing people, and providing and creating the economy. Buying goods, and that's what it's all about. And anyone can do it. I mean, you got to just have that mindset of that ability to initiate something and to stay on it and do it for the right reasons. So we've for many years have supported entrepreneurs, whether they're social entrepreneurs or for-profit entrepreneurs. We think those are the people that are the catalysts that really create the value. So wherever we can, Adrian and myself sat on the board of a network for scale-up businesses called Endeavor in South Africa, and that does great work. And wherever we can, like kind of mentorship programs, trying to encourage people to do something, just to start it, to initiate it. Oftentimes the most difficult step's the first step, just letting go and going for it. So, I just feel that, if we could create a culture in South Africa of people just going, doing it and starting small stuff. And, you obviously got to give them some knowledge on how to go about it. But it's really just about an attitude, that they can do it and get it going. So wherever we can, as a Discovery, even in our business, in our ordinary business on a day-to-day basis, we've tried to encourage new starts and people, creating business.
Incidentally, Mentorship with Purpose is taking place during Youth Month. Is there any significance to that? And your thinking around how we can develop and help the youth harness their fullest potential?
Yes, I mean, that is the most difficult time, because a lot of people are coming out of school, out of university, and not finding something immediately, not finding a job. Or I do think you need some sort of background in order to learn how to do it for yourself. You need to get it, certainly ability to get a start early on in your career. So I do think it is a major challenge in South Africa. How do you actually transition from a very theoretical school or university into the business environment? I think that's the time, that transition. And again, I find people are like very reliant on society providing them something. They should actually just go for it themselves. A company wants to hire one that's a self-starter that initiates, things. That's what you want. So I just encourage the youth. I know it is difficult, trying to find a job and all these kinds of things, but actually you got to have the right attitude. You got to have that positive attitude of trying to build something. And so oftentimes I just find it's, as I said earlier on, it's around about getting that right attitude out of school and out of university. You've got to get that right attitude of what you want to do in your career. And it's not about someone providing it to you. And unfortunately, these days it is tougher. You just got to go, sometimes just do it for yourself.
I was hoping that we could also look at an interesting area of work that is a wonderful case study around the theme that we'll be having in our panel a little bit later on, and this has to do with public-private partnerships. You partnered with the city of Johannesburg as Discovery, and you went into Orange Farm to empower the community there. And it's a cause that's also, I understand, quite close to your heart. Speak to me about your projects in Orange Farm and the successes you've been able to see out of it.
Again, it was around entrepreneurship. It was around educating people who are starting businesses in order to assist them. So, we give our view of how to do that, basic financial aspects, computing aspects, marketing, these kinds of things. That's the kind of stuff that we provide in Orange Farm, as well as we've done some work around healthcare in the area. So, and it's a community that's close to the city, but actually quite impoverished. And, I think, people in the city, if they can, try and lend a hand to Orange Farm. So we found it was an area where we could add a significant amount of value. And it's been a very good partnership over the years, and it keeps on growing. And, it's something that we want to build on into the future.
Well, those insights will certainly also come through a lot more when we talk with our panel, which I'll be introducing in a short while. But Barry, before we conclude our segment, I know you're extremely supportive of the CSI work that's done by Discovery, and you've committed, in fact, to giving a masterclass as part of the week-long program that's part of Mentorship with Purpose. What can we look forward to for your session?
Yeah, look, so again, I'm going to be talking about being a self-starter, about leadership. For me, leadership is so important that take the start of Discovery. Very few people created a phenomenal business today. Look, today it's a great organization with a lot of people involved. We employ about 12,000 people, so it's a massive organization today. And it's got, we employ phenomenal people. But really at the start, there was a few people who made a significant difference, that had a positive attitude. They wanted to build something, positive for society, an iconic business. And I think for me, that's the most important thing, is that it's all about leadership. And, even take government, any organization, municipalities, it's all about the people in leadership positions, with proper governance, the right kind of ethics, and the right kind of attitude. We can do anything we put our hearts to. And for me, that's what the most important thing is. That's what I want to talk about on Wednesday is, leadership is a responsibility. You got to do it for the right reasons. It's not about, self-enrichment. Obviously people in leadership, they can do well financially, etc. But it's not about self-enrichment. It's about, trying to create something positive for society, to create longevity. It's not about short-termism, and people are going to look for the long term, to build something of value that society can be proud of. So for me, it's everything at the end of the day is about having the right people in the right position. So creates positive, that flywheel we spoke about earlier on. It creates positivity going forward, not negativity. You don't want to go into a downward spiral. You want to go into an upward spiral. So that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about positive, ethical leadership.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, really looking forward to it. Barry, thank you for kicking us off and framing, in fact, the heart, the passion, and the thinking behind Mentorship with Purpose. I just want to remind everyone who's joining us this morning that we are on a mission. We're on a mission to set a new Guinness World Record. And this record is for the greatest number of people dialed into a leadership coaching session. And we can actually set that record jointly together. So just follow the details. We're sharing the link, the details on the screen of the link that you can follow, because the Guinness World Record Adjudicator is with us. Our 24-hour countdown has begun. So we want to set a world record for the most number of pledges received for a mentoring campaign within 24 hours. And that effort has already begun. And as Barry has been speaking and sharing his experience, I hope it's inspired you to play that sort of role in somebody else's life. Mentor someone that could gain from hearing about the road that you've traveled and the insights that you've gained over the years. So go on and make a pledge and commit to coaching and mentoring someone in your personal capacity. So Barry is going to be staying with us. He'll be joining us as part of our panel, which comes up next. But make sure that you use this opportunity to also ask questions. Place your question in the chat function, and we'll filter through those questions and ask them to our panel at the end of our discussion. I've got a few questions that will kick us off, but this is also a platform for you to pose your questions. Now, if there's ever been a question about the value of effective leadership, I think the past year has put all doubt to rest. We've seen leaders across industries and sectors rise to the challenge of COVID-19. Heads of state, for instance, have had to skillfully guide their country's efforts to confront the pandemic head on. And likewise, even in corporate and the public spheres, many CEOs have had to lead their organizations to quickly pivot in response to changes that were needed. And we've witnessed leaders in organization after organization manage their teams when teams have needed to shift from in-person to full-time remote work practically overnight. It's been an unbelievable a year and a half or so. Now, no doubt, business researchers for many years are going to study what has separated leaders who succeeded from those who were less effective during these unprecedented times. And so in this session, we thought to discuss what it's like and what it takes to lead through crisis. And we've got three senior leaders, individuals who are well established, well recognized and respected in their fields. And we'll also look at innovating in crisis through public-private partnerships. There's no question that the coronavirus and the pandemic and the lockdown has placed extraordinary demands on leaders in business and beyond. So here is our panel. Here are the individuals that you get to learn from this morning. Barry Schwartzberg, of course, founder and group executive director of Vitality Group. First on the panel, welcome back, Barry. Looking forward to picking your brain a little bit more. And then I would like to welcome Professor Glenda Gray. And she is the first female president and CEO of the South African Medical Research Council. She was the chair of the Research Committee on COVID-19, bringing together scientific evidence and experience to the Minister of Health and the National Coronavirus Command Council. Now, Professor Gray spearheads the South African Medical Research Council's funding broadly and for COVID-19. It was a couple of years ago when Forbes named her one of Africa's 50 most powerful women, and Time said she is one of the world's most influential people. And in 2013, she was awarded South Africa's highest honor, and that is one of the honors, the Order of Mapungubwe, and she joins us this morning. Professor Gray, any opening thoughts on mentorship with purpose? Good morning.
Good morning, and good morning to everybody who's dialed in here, and hopefully you're going to win. To see those people that shine and are stumbling, and to encourage them to move forward. I've spent a lot of time mentoring young women. Because as a young woman, I never had any female mentors. I was fortunate to have a lot of male mentors who saw some spark in me and gave me opportunities. And I've tried to do the same thing with a whole bunch of women scientists and women doctors who I've mentored over the years. And it's been so encouraging to see them flourish and do great things. And I always say that my mentees will be greater and do better things than me. And I'm always so proud when they flourish and exceed me as great scientists. So I think it's important to, in terms of mentorship, is to have an informal dialogue and support with your mentees, and that you try and develop them in many aspects of their life besides just work. Coming as a baby boomer, we have an unhealthy relationship with work. We're workaholics, and trying to teach young women about trying to find balance in their life and to try and grow as individuals at the same time as having a fulfilled life. So I always loved to see people innovate, to look at challenges and find solutions, and to think on their feet, and not to be scared of anything, and to never ever think that they can't achieve anything.
Oh, wonderful words. Not to be scared. I'm busy making notes here, making notes because all of you have such incredible lessons to share with us today. Thank you for joining us, Professor Gray. And our next guest, our next panelist is Busisiwe Mavuso. She is courageous in her leadership, always forthright and speaks her mind. And she's a chartered certified accountant. She holds a master's degree in business leadership, a postgraduate qualification in management from Gibbs, and also a BCom in accounting. She is the Chief Executive Officer at Business Leadership South Africa, which is an independent association of the leaders of some of South Africa's biggest and most well-known organizations. It's a forum for engaging key leaders, including civil society and labor, to exchange ideas in the national interest and to create effective dialogue with government and other stakeholders. Busisiwe is also a non-executive director on the board of ESCOM, and she is also Business Unity South Africa and Reluctant Finance. She serves for them as well, and on the Human Resource Development Council, the advisory committee of the Local Government Ethical Leadership Initiative, and the Alcohol Industry Advisory Council and the Social Justice Council's boards. So she joins us as we kick off our panel conversation with our panelists, and you're welcome to pose your questions throughout the session. Busisiwe, we're always wonderful to chat to you and get your reflections on leadership. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, and thank you very much to Discovery for extending this invitation. So I think my initial thoughts on mentorship and on leadership, and I think for me, the lens through which I engage with this, and I think one of my biggest passions is to really look at how we are intentional and deliberate about grooming young women who are actually coming up, in corporate South Africa, because I think a lot of us, as women have found it very difficult to actually often break the artificial glass ceilings that actually exist, especially in corporate South Africa. So it therefore is incumbent on us as those that have come before the young breed of women leaders that are actually in corporate South Africa to actually have conversations with them in terms of how you best navigate that which we are facing in corporate South Africa as women leaders, as it were. So I think the critical issue is how we also make that mindset shift, in our young women, as it were, and I think this probably maybe is a conversation that needs to start at home, in terms of the conversations that we have with our young girls in particular, and how we influence and shape them towards a particular direction. So I really think that the biggest problem is really the barriers and red tapes that are established for us as young girls in terms of who we can become and what we can achieve. So you see, if you are going to have self-limiting messages that are going to be reinforced in you throughout your whole life, it unfortunately ends up becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. So because by and large, when you look at how we are shaped as individuals, you will see that we are products of our own environment. So the mind is a very powerful instrument, and if you're going to be giving or you're going to be given messages your entire life that you need to know your place as a woman, that you cannot do this, you cannot do that, you cannot be too successful because you will scare off men, you mustn't be too vocal because it is not ladylike. You are told, limiting stereotypes such as men are born to take charge and women are born to take care. Those things are actually going to trip you up when it comes to leadership, because leadership is about effectiveness and it is about assertiveness. So it therefore matters how you show up as a leader. So I think normally that is the mindset shift that I normally like to instill in these young women, when trying to shape the leaders that they become and in the mentoring conversations that I actually have with them.
Oh, thank you so much for those opening reflections. So that is our panel, Barry, Professor Gray, and Busisiwe Mavuso. And let's get going, because there's so much we can learn from the way in which you've navigated this period. The pandemic undoubtedly is and has been a defining leadership moment. It has been ruled by unfamiliarity, by uncertainty. And I'm curious to know from you what the leadership principles that you've relied on during this time are. And Professor, let me start with you. What are those leadership principles that have carried you through this period?
Never say never. Do the impossible. And don't accept no for an answer, and just to rise to love challenge. So I think we were a bunch of researchers, and we do clinical trials, and we move from running small clinical trials to actually running a vaccination program. From only enrolling usually a couple of hundred people at our sites to enrolling 500,000 healthcare workers. And so we had never done it before, but that didn't stop us. We just rolled up our sleeves and got the job done. And so I think for me, it's also innovating, except listen, except when things go wrong, change your tactic. Always think on your feet, and always try and find solutions. Never mind being wrong, and accepting that you can be wrong, and then also finding solutions and listening to people. So you need a team. So I think in terms of leadership, particularly with COVID, is team. If you don't work in a team and you don't listen to your team, you're never going to be successful, and you're never going to be able to innovate. So I think the important thing for us is if you rise to the occasion and you take charge and you decide to do something, you can make mistakes along the way, but as long as you always think about what's happened and come up with solutions. And so, and every day is different, and never ever think that because something happened and you achieved yesterday, you're going to achieve the same. We make lots of mistakes, but the important thing is to keep moving and to make sure that that whatever was truth yesterday may not be truth today or tomorrow, and to know that these are times that we can't predict. We could not predict that the Delta variant would overtake the Beta variant, and we learned that a couple of days ago. And already we're innovating, and we're looking to see, okay, do we have to change our tactic? Whatever we believed was true last week may not be true this week, and that's the beauty of COVID, because it teaches us to accept everything and to keep changing.
Oh, wonderful. I think we would need to kind of cut that, package it, and have it play for leaders every morning. You've just said so much that says accept the moment, accept the novel, be agile and be flexible, not a fixed kind of mindset that is too rigid. This is not what this kind of moment has called for. And Busi, what leadership principles have you relied on during this time?
I am unmuted. Okay, so for me, obviously in a crisis situation, you cannot respond as you would in a routine emergency. And I think you therefore do not have the latitude of following up or rather following drawn up plans, that have been put there in advance. So you are facing a situation that is fueled by unfamiliarity, by vulnerability, by volatility, by uncertainty. And you are facing a situation that is unfamiliar and is often a black swan event than like what we actually have faced, during the COVID-19 crisis. So I've really learned that a predefined response cannot be the solution. So it requires a certain degree of agility. It requires a certain degree of engaging with issues from a humane perspective. It was actually interesting for me, when we started this COVID crisis and you looked at the countries that actually did well, during this crisis in terms of responding thereto. It was amazing how the human side of leadership, or the human elements or characteristics or qualities of leadership actually shone through. It was amazing how the countries that were actually led by women, your Denmark, your Finland, your New Zealand, did much more better in responding to the crisis than all the other countries in the world. And I think it actually just amplifies, how the engaging with the human lens through a crisis situation is critical. How you actually need to have this notion of responsive leadership, how you actually need to assess what you're confronted with and come up with a solution that is actually going to deal with that appropriate crisis, as it were, and never forget the human face, in all of that, because then you're not just only dealing with objects, but you're dealing with human lives, as it were. And I think we also did well as a country in terms of how we're very responsive from giving food parcels, from putting in place the 350 unemployment grant, by the TES response that we actually implemented as a country, the Solidarity Fund that we actually implemented, that we all contributed to as South African citizens. So I really think that human element, is really critical, and it really shines through above all in a crisis situation. So I think that is the one predefining thing that really stuck with me during this time, Maza. Thank you.
Yes, yes. And for you, Barry, are there principles that proved to be quite significant in the past couple of months?
So, for me, I think what has been important is what has been important has been first of all, I think you need to be kind. I mean, I think people are going through a tough time during this crisis. I think people have had a difficult time, whether it's business-wise or it's emotional, or I think it's just been a difficult period. So first of all, just be kind to people. I find work can be difficult. Work can be harsh, and you have that sort of tough edge to it. But I think specifically during this time, just be kind, be empathetical. Understand people's position. They've got young kids at home, and all these kinds of things. I think that's been the first thing for me, is just the empathy and kindness, as Busisiwe was saying. This is the human element. Just you got to understand that, and I think you got to be a little bit more patient than you would in a normal environment, normal working environment. I think it's time for a little bit more of humanity. Secondly, for me, it's about communication. You got to up your communication. I know people are tired of Zoom calls and team meetings and all these kinds of things, but actually you should be talking to people, not just sending them WhatsApps and emails, actually just getting on the phone and having a conversation, see how they're doing, have a chat and talk. People miss that human touch in the communication. And I think over this time, it's been very, you needed to have effective communication, on an ongoing basis. So whether it's in a team environment or one-on-one, I think communication has been very, very important. Also focus. I suppose in a normal work environment, you can do a lot more things. Now, today, I think you need to be a bit more focused, to get things done. Focus on your vision as your business. I think less is more. I think people have actually worked extremely hard, quite frankly, during this period. And you need to understand that actually the work output has been phenomenal. People have worked hard at home. They're not traveling, spending time in traffic, etc. People have worked exceptionally hard, but there's been a lack of collaboration. So I think the focus should be more on collaboration. And as I said, be kind to people. Let them have time off, lunchtime off, finish off early. People can be responding to emails late at night, early in the morning, etc. You've got to be aware of those kinds of things. I think new business as well has been a little bit more difficult. Existing business, working existing business has been okay and good, but creating new business has been quite difficult in this. People are spending less, they're more, wary of spending money. So I think new business has been a bit of a challenge. So those are my lessons over this period.
Yes. We're going to unpack some of the areas that you've touched on collectively as we go along, because so many interesting facets to leadership and innovation and partnership have come up. But As leaders, you're also expected to be crisis handlers and crisis facilitators. How's the pressure and the expectation been for you to have all the answers and decisively deal with a crisis situation? I think, Professor, you touched on that a little bit earlier on, as in be ready to recognize if something's not working, keep it moving. So you seem to deal with that pressure, with that pressure valve pretty well, and it must be a product of the area or the discipline that you're in, research, science, and of course always seeking to answer questions for the benefit of society. But how is that pressure and the sense of expectations, everybody looking to you to have the answer being on you?
Sorry, so as a doctor, I think I had wonderful training in crisis. And so as a young doctor, I'm becoming a pediatrician, working in ICU and working in emergency rooms and having to intubate sick babies, drop babies that are about to die. It teaches you to be resilient to stress. And so I think we, as a medical doctor, I got wonderful grounding in being able to manage crisis and stress. And then moving on to science, you learn the uncertainty, and you learn to accept loss, and you learn to accept that the work that you might do may not work. And trying to find an HIV vaccine, for instance, I've led 2 trials that have failed, and that can be devastating to the human endeavor and to science themselves. But it's to pick yourself up and say, okay, this one didn't work, and now we'll try again. So for me, it's about the wonderful training I got as a doctor in South Africa to face crisis, and then in science to accept loss and accept failure, and just to keep on trying. And one day you'll get there. And so I think that's been lucky from my professional point of view that I've been able to do that. And then moving to the head of the Medical Research Council is to put yourself in a different position, and in a position to not only have benefited from science, but to benefit others, so that others can benefit. So to create opportunities, research opportunities, to create opportunities for women, and implement new programs. And so that's been a wonderful thing for me, to be the head of the Medical Research Council, because I've been able to set up programs and systems and research opportunities that never existed before. And it's a wonderful thing to be able to not only receive, but also to give.
Wow. I read somewhere where you were comparing what happened in the early years of fighting HIV and what is happening now. You say the sadness and the panic is pretty similar. It's just that with COVID, it's almost concertinaed. It's intensified. It's expressed in an intense moment, versus with HIV, with it being over a much drawn out period, months and years. So the pressure has certainly been pretty high.
The training in HIV helped us respond to COVID. And so all that training in to face adversity, to face AIDS denialism, to face government intransigence, it trained us very well. We had to face during AIDS denialism, taking a government to court to provide mother-to-child transmission interventions. We had to fight for the initiation of antiretroviral treatment to people who would have died if they didn't have it. And so I guess having come from that background, so not only was I a doctor and a scientist, but I also learned to be an activist and advocacy, and working with women and children who were dying from HIV, caused me to move into research so that we could find solutions. And so I think the experience in HIV definitely helped the scientists, because all the scientists who were involved in HIV shifted their attention and threw in their lot to try and find solutions, not only in South Africa, but at a global level. We got on calls, weekends, nights, planning a vaccine program that has been hugely successful. I was able to work with Operation Warp Speed and the CoVPN BARDA to execute international studies looking at Moderna and AstraZeneca, Novavax, and the J&J vaccine. So being an HIV scientist, helped me contribute at a global level to finding finding vaccines for COVID-19. And so I think science and medicine and being an advocate, it does bode well for a response for the epidemic. And I see all my fellow researchers who were also activists and doctors in the past that also have done phenomenally well in guiding the country through this pandemic.
Yes. So relying on past experience, because there are lots of learnings from previous crises, no matter how different. But Busisiwe, as a leader, you have to make good, fast decisions and very challenging circumstances, and you're making decisions on big bets. It's a high stakes game, and yet it's so unfamiliar at the same time. Talk to us about having the perfect answers versus accepting that for this unknown moment in history that we are living through, good enough is pretty okay.
So, it's a tough one, because you also don't have all the answers, but there is a saying that if the general is in the trenches, then the battle is lost. So someone is actually going to have to take charge. Someone is actually going to show direction. Someone is actually going to give hope, that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. You are required at that time as to become what your organization, or in this case, your country, needs you to be at the time. And I think earlier on I spoke about responsive leadership. So it's critical, therefore, from a decision-making perspective, to actually be agile. Right? You don't have the latitude of over-researching a solution. You actually need to look at the facts that are placed in front of you and be responsive. And look at what, or rather go with what you think is the best decision at the time, right? It might not be the best decision in retrospect later on when you look at what could have been done, but it certainly is going to be the best decision at the time. The worst thing that you can do, is to be a fence sitter. The worst thing that you can do is to try and, do a lot of fact gathering to come up with a perfect solution. There is nothing like a perfect solution during this critical time. There is just a solution. And that is what people are looking to you for, as it were. So I think this notion of being in charge is actually a very critical one, and also an acknowledgement as that you cannot please everyone, and that's okay. The intention at that time is to try and diffuse the situation. The intention at that time is to try and deal with what you confronted. You're not trying to be nice to everyone, and you are not in a popularity contest, and that's okay. So I think there needs to be that appreciation as well. And I think the other thing that I also realized in my own circumstances is that as much as everything is probably maybe sitting on your shoulders, as it were, for you to give direction, for you to lead, for you to show the way, you also cannot over-exaggerate your ability to control, in that particular time. So being consultative in the process is critical, because I think you have to acknowledge that there is no monopoly on wisdom. So trying to get other views, is also critical, just so that you can actually probably maybe stress test the decision that you're about to make, or just double check if the facts that you're seeing in front of you are indeed what they are. So in that way, you can make a decision at least having gotten the benefits, of a view or two from your other colleagues, as it were, but really nothing prepares you for it. So I think it becomes difficult, it really requires you to roll with the punches, and see where you actually land up, as it were, and I think often you will find that whatever decision that you make at that time, having actually taken all the facts and the circumstances, that you have in front of you, will be the right decision for the time. And I think you can deal with the consequences later. Thanks, Azania.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for that, Busisiwe. That really gives us a reference to the kind of things that go on in a leader's mind, and the pressure, of course, to come up with answers and be decisive. But as you say, being a fence sitter does not help us make progress in the least. Now, Barry, in reflecting about today's session, I went back to the Carnevin framework, which is a sense-making model to help leaders understand that every situation is different and that it requires a unique approach to decision-making. The program, the framework kind of outlines situational domains that are defined by cause and effect relationships. Like, for example, if the situation is complicated, you look to your response can be founded in looking to good practice. And then if the situation is obvious, you look at best practice. If the situation is chaotic, you look at novel practices. But if the situation is complex, then you have to look to emergent practices. And I wondered about what your experience as an organization and as an individual has taught you about working in complexity, which is really what this pandemic is all about. It's been a complex situation, not just a virus, but also a complex situation that has arisen in dealing with the pandemic.
Azania, thanks. Yes, I think it has been difficult and complex. I mean, I think, people have to respond to what is happening in the environment, in their business. And so there's a lot to deal with and to think about. But in terms of, like, how does it apply to a business in terms of decision making? I'm not a fan of, like, leader makes a decision, etc. I like to be part of a team that debates things, and you should have peers, people that you work with that you can debate things with thoroughly, seeing it from all angles, and then ultimately the path forward becomes more obvious once you've debated all the angles of something. Very seldom in business is it a choice between A and B, and you got to choose A, or I think you should debate these things until the choice becomes an obvious thing, not through debate and through applying intellectual rigor to the situation. That's what I like in the environment where we like to operate, where that's the case. So given the complexity, I think you actually need to debate more. You need to look at this issues. You need to really debate it, and rather spend a little bit of time going through the arguments and understanding the aspects of something before going a specific route. That's in my mind. And given the complexity, I think you need to up that, not reduce it. So it's more about debate, communication, and that type of thing, and discussion. And then, as I said, I think then routes forward become more obvious.
Right. And Barry, let me stay with you as we now look at public-private partnerships, because in the face of the pandemic, public-private partnerships have become a necessity, because it's been clear that government alone is not equipped to provide the full range of services or expertise or response to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. And so I imagine that it has expanded government's reliance on the public sector. But how do you think the pandemic has shaped or is now influencing the nature of public-private partnerships?
I mean, I hate that divide of public and private. I think there should be way more collaboration between the two. They're interdependent. One cannot survive without the other. You need governance. You need a public service that is functioning. You need a private sector that is thriving and paying taxes. They're symbiotic, One cannot survive without the other. And I just wish on both sides of the fence, people start working more and more together, I think, through the difficult time we've been through with the pandemic, it's been forced in a way. Governments and private sector have been forced to work together. They have to work together. But in my mind, it should be natural. I mean, in all endeavors in life, it should be that, to try and improve things for society, we should work together on every single aspect, whether it's education, whether it's healthcare, whether it's police, everything. These partnerships should exist for the benefit of society. Oftentimes, you get people in private sector complaining governments aren't doing things, and people in government complaining private sector. But at the end of the day, it should be a collaborative enterprise. You can't just say, listen, that's their problem, they should resolve it, or it's about trying to work together for the common good. And I just wish there'll be more and more of that. Get rid of that distrust between the two, and there should be a trusting relationship, because at the end of the day, as I said, it is a symbiotic relationship. One can't exist without the other.
And Professor Gray, let me come to you, because one of the questions I had has actually come through on our question line. So remember, to everyone who's watching, everyone who's a delegate today, you can ask questions, pose your questions on leadership, on innovation, on mentorship to our panel. We've got Barry Schwartzberg, Professor Glenda Gray, as well as Busisiwe Mavuso. And just use the question function as part of the chat to pose your question. One that's come in for you, Professor, is how did the lessons of the HIV and AIDS period inform on a better response to the COVID pandemic, and particularly in bringing together the appropriate partnerships? And Ruth, who's asked this question, goes on to say, what have you learned about the gains of public-private partnership and collaboration generally during the pandemic?
First and foremost, I think everybody wanted to work together. And so this was the most beautiful opportunity for the public and private sector and philanthropy to work together. And we saw the emergence of Solidarity Fund and in South Africa and other entities in other parts of the world. And so when you have a crisis, everybody throws their efforts in, and that was a very good response. And we saw that with vaccine development. We saw philanthropy, federal funds, the public purse, government money, and manufacturers working together to solve a vaccine development question in 8 months, as compared to the many years that we have done in the past. So how did the HIV epidemic help us? And I'll draw from vaccines. So we've spent 20 years looking at different vaccine platforms, and these vaccine platforms that we developed for HIV have been used in Zika, Ebola, and with COVID. And so if we hadn't invested all that time with HIV vaccine development, we wouldn't have been able to accelerate the platform, particularly with the AD26, the chimp ad, and other platforms. So I think that's an important thing. It also, having experience as vaccine researchers, having experience as clinical researchers, enabled us to conduct trials of a high quality. And so we were able to transition from our HIV vaccine work, our HIV work, straight and deliver high quality work. We also had spent many years developing a wonderful laboratory infrastructure in South Africa and wonderful basic scientists. And so these people immediately transitioned into COVID, and we were able to do neutralization studies because of our work that we'd done in HIV before. So our laboratories were spectacular. Our genetic surveillance, we'd spend years investing in HIV genetic surveillance, and so we were able to transition immediately, and that's why we were able to discover the beta variant in South Africa, because of the kind of investment that we've done in the past. And so I think in terms of HIV research, HIV research is the gift that keeps on giving, because it has created a platform to respond to Ebola, Zika, and COVID as well. And what it also has taught us is that philanthropy, federal funds, public purse, and manufacturers can work together. And a good example of this is obviously the mRNA launch that our president spoke about last week, and the identification that South Africa needs to get involved in vaccine manufacturability. And this pandemic has taught us that we have the capability, and we have the infrastructure, and we have the scientists. And we now need to also put our money in this and make sure that everyone understands that when you're poor and when you live in Africa or you're an African country, science is not a luxury. Science actually is a necessity, and we should never ever forget that that we've forgotten that science is a necessity particularly for poor people, and we should always make sure we invest in science and invest in innovation and research and development, because it's at our peril that we find ourselves in a continent that cannot make a vaccine or is behind on it. And so we really have to address those issues so that we're ready for future pandemics. And when we invest in R&D and when we invest in innovation, we thrive. Look at South Korea, look at Malaysia, look at India, their vaccine capability. And so we can thrive, we can build the economy by just investing in research and development, and particularly in medical interventions and therapeutics. Pharmaceutical companies are a thriving business and an important source of growth. And for us not to engage in medical innovation and medical R&D is a huge waste for South Africa. It's how we can grow our economy and how we can grow our science and how we can grow the health of our people. So I think that's an important thing. So I'm fortunate because I'm involved in medical science. So I see the value of what we can do and how medical science has changed the lives, has increased the survival of people, particularly HIV. And that if it wasn't for science, we wouldn't have been able to increase or breathe life into South Africans who were HIV infected. And so I think if we don't have a good health system and a health research system, then it's at a disadvantage to our competitiveness at a global level.
So you also then welcome the blurring of the lines and this collaboration. As you say, the sectors have been dying to have this level of collaboration and interdependence. And what about power dynamics? Are there power dynamics present in these partnerships, and the level of transparency that would need to be there for these kind of partnerships and relationships to flourish? What has been your experience, especially in light of the picture you've just painted, Prof?
There will always be power dynamics between the partners. And I think the important thing is to make sure that your principles are established up front, and that your terms of engagement are established before things can go wrong. And I think what we saw this with vaccine manufacturing. So the US public purse bankrolled the vaccine development for COVID-19, and many of the companies that benefited and got very rich still made sure that the vaccines were quite expensive, and so didn't benefit. They didn't take any risk, and they benefited a lot, and they were very slow to give back the good that they had received from public money. And so I think that's an important lesson, is to make sure that when we work as partners, that there's benefit sharing. And we didn't see a lot of benefit sharing in the beginning of the vaccine manufacturability. And hopefully now that's changing, but it's not the companies that have led it. It's largely the countries. It's the countries that have donated the vaccines, and very few manufacturers have tried to benefit share in places like Africa, and to make sure that their wins are our wins as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, Busisiwe, let me come to you on this question. What is the best way to leverage public-private partnerships to improve community resilience, especially in times of crisis and disaster?
As I really think the best way to really leverage PPPs during this time is to look at what the strength of the other partner is, and allow that partner to actually run with their strength or deliver on that which they are best at delivering in. And I really think that the biggest PPP for me during this time, or rather that has been unveiled during this crisis, is that of social justice, is that of conscious capitalism, is that of stakeholder capitalism. You see, for me, this is critical because one of the things that the COVID-19 crisis has really exposed for us as a society is just how fractured our democracy is and how unequal our society is. So unfortunately, what all of this means is that the deprivation for the majority of South African citizens has just intensified. And we have realized as a country just how the economic vulnerability of some segments of society increases the vulnerability of all of us. It therefore means from a business perspective, we need to do more. It therefore means from a business perspective, we cannot leave government alone to drive the inclusivity agenda. It therefore means from a business perspective, we need to try and answer the question around what ought to be our role in complementing the government efforts, to boost economic performance within the context of COVID. And I think it is important to highlight that, the role of social justice, as I've said, doesn't only rely on the shoulders of government. So as a grouping that has levers to economic power, we have a special responsibility to work firmly towards this agenda. Because if you look at it, as you will see, that business can only prosper in a prosperous society. What interventions, therefore, are we putting in place to drive this notion of social justice? And I think the biggest gift that business in this country can give to South Africa is how we are more intentional and deliberate about dealing with the issue of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. We can't sleep well at night as business leaders sitting in a country with poverty levels of over 55%, sitting in a country with unemployment levels of 43% in terms of the expanded definition, where you have more people that are unemployed than those that are employed in all the provinces except Gauteng and the Western Cape. It doesn't matter which way you choose to look at it, as it is a recipe for disaster. But it's actually interesting for me because on the flip side, you will see that if as business we were to work very closely with government towards driving the social justice agenda, you will see that it is actually going to be self-serving for us as business, because we would be investing in our future markets, because we would be investing in our future sustainability, because it would mean, that once you achieve this notion, you have more people with disposable income, which can now afford to buy your goods and services. And because they can afford to buy your goods and services, you have the ability, to increase the demand increases, and you have the ability as business to produce more. And it therefore means, that business can be more sustainable, unlike this environment where we find ourselves in, with this pyramid structure, which only means, that as the middle class, which is the driver of economic growth in a country, you're only sitting with about 30%, of the people. And I don't know what the numbers are today, with the unemployment sitting at what it's sitting. So I really think that the biggest gift, and the biggest focus and the biggest intervention in as far as PPP is concerned, as I would be for us as business, to drive the social justice agenda with government. Thanks, Azania.
Thank you, Busi. In fact, one of our delegates, Abigail Sikwabe-Taleba, says one of the things that the pandemic has really brought to light is the issue of inequality, both locally and across the globe, from a means of perspective as well as access to healthcare, education, opportunities, etc. And she talks about business leaders planning to attempt to close or at least narrow these gaps. What are business leaders doing to do that? And she raises the question of EVDS, that's for the registration of vaccines, that whilst it may be accessible to many people, it's not accessible to people in rural areas. What are business leaders thinking around the role that they can play in closing such gaps, Busi, because you do represent a body where business leaders talk and debate and come together to express their views on what's happening in society?
So as business, we actually have organized ourselves as Business for South Africa. And you would have realized as a country that a lot of the efforts, actually Business for South Africa was put together to respond to the COVID crisis. I think when we hit the first wave in March 2020, we organized ourselves to actually respond to the issues around the PPE crisis, how we make sure, that there is sufficient PPE, you know, not just for the health workers, but for the broader South African citizens, as it were, you know. And I think it was during that time where we actually set up the Solidarity Fund. And I think you would have realized that 80% of the contributors to the Solidarity Fund were businesses themselves. So I think business has really come to the party in terms of how we best respond, you know, to this crisis. But I think outside of the Business for South Africa initiative, a lot of companies have actually done a lot, you know, in the form of food parcels, you know, in the form of, you know, in the communities where they operate, looking at how they are best responsive in terms of dealing with the crisis. And I don't think that a lot of businesses rushed to actually, you know, lay off workers. You know, a lot of us kept a lot of our employees on our payrolls, even though the future was uncertain, even though a lot of us were shut down as industries, and we didn't know, you know, when we're actually going to resume operations again, you know. So there is a lot that was done in as far as that is concerned. And from a vaccination program, I can tell you that it was business first that actually proposed the threshold, you know, to be brought down to the 50-year-olds, you know, and I think we saw the president announce that last night. So there is a lot that we're actually doing at the moment to actually try and see how we best work with government. And I think a lot of us in the form of availing vaccination sites have actually done a lot. We all know that Discovery is actually one of the vaccination sites that is actually was made available by burying them to ensure that government can actually best work and can actually best deliver on this vaccination program. So it's work in progress, but we continue to actually deliberately and intentionally work with government towards dealing with this issue because it's important for all of us.
Right. Barry, we are reaching the end of our panel. As far as questions from me are concerned, we're coming to questions from all our delegates and they're coming through on our system. So we're just filtering through them and we'll be asking them to our panel. So keep your questions coming. Just go to the chat function of the platform and pose your questions there. I'm able to see them on this side. But Barry, let's talk about opportunities, turning crisis into opportunities. How can we turn a crisis into an opportunity for growth, for community resilience, for positive change?
So, I mean, I think there are opportunities that are created through this. I do think that out of every crisis, opportunities do come, especially now. I think as, you know, I know we're in the thick of the third wave, but as we come out of this and we start vaccinating more and there's more herd immunity, I think, you know, people that take it, you know, think about the future in a positive light will see opportunities. I mean, our very own business was started in the early 1990s when South Africa was going through a very tough time, and we looked at it positively. And I think you got to have that mindset of looking at things and looking for opportunities right now and seeing where things can land. I know it's right now it's difficult, but in the next 4, 5 months, 6 months, you'll see, you know, a slight increase in economic activity, and then people got to take advantage of it. I just want to respond to you know, what Busisiwe was saying about, you know, Discovery's involvement in the COVID aspects. Is we've done an enormous amount as a business. You know, not only the vaccination sites which we're trying to roll out around the country, but we created the app, the COVID alert app. So this kind of crisis, just for us, created opportunities to add value. We try to get people to exercise at home through trying to make vitality more relevant in the home setting as opposed to going to gyms or whatever. Just we rethought our business through this environment, and, you know, getting people to come to giving people like free Ubers rides to get to the doctor or to get to the vaccine sites or whatever. We've really tried as an organization, thinking through the now, what is required right now in order to assist society. So we've had a significant amount of energy and effort through the crisis, and I think opportunities will come as well.
Right. Let's turn to the questions that are being asked by our delegates, because quite a few have come in. And Barry, I'm going to stay with you. And many of our delegates are thinking about mentorship. You know that this morning, over the next 24 hours, we are trying to set a new Guinness World Record. And we're asking that as many people go and pledge, make a commitment to mentor someone in your personal capacity. You have to make this pledge and be able to share your story to guide someone, help them to their fullest potential. So there's a question that comes from Bright Amisi. And Bright wants to know, he says, this is for Barry. You mentioned the role that Laurie played in funding and mentoring you and Adrian. What is your advice to entrepreneurs when looking for a mentor?
Yeah, so you need someone that's certainly, has the experience, has made mistakes in the past and learned from those mistakes and got some experience about it. So you need to seek someone out that can offer you that advice. It doesn't necessarily want to get involved in the business, or you can just bounce ideas off them and talk about issues. I think people get too involved in their business and can't see the wood for the trees, and you need someone from the outside looking in. It is so important. An advisory panel, mentors, you got to see the business from a different perspective and your own performance from a different perspective. Very difficult for you to see the errors of your ways, takes a very mature a person with, to see the errors of your own ways. So you got to have that influence from the outside. Someone's got to say to you, hey, Barry, you're doing this wrong. I can see this, from a different perspective. I find a lot from my colleagues. My colleagues look at the way you're operating and that type of thing, and offer you advice where you're going wrong and where you're going right. So I think you need that advice. You definitely do. No matter what enterprise you're in, someone's got to come in, look in from the outside and say, you're making these obvious mistakes. You've got to try and fix it up. Whether they look at your finances, or look at your marketing campaign, or look at your opportunities in your strategy. You need an external pair of eyes. And it doesn't have to be, as I said, it can be someone independent, someone's got no real sort of interest in the business, just trying to give you some advice on how you should be taking your business forward. So I think mentoring for me is so important. You got to find that person that can offer that with, it has that kind of experience. So someone has been and seen it before.
Yes, been there, seen it before. And I want to extend this question to our other panelists as well. In your experience in seeking out a mentor, what do you advise for someone to look for in seeking a mentor? What were you looking for when you found your mentors? Busi, let me start with you and I'll come to the Prof in a moment.
Thank you very much. Sure. Yeah, no, that's an interesting one. But I think you're looking for someone who has actually traversed the road before, someone who has actually been there, has made the mistakes, someone who has actually, gotten their fingers bent and can actually give you guidance, in terms of what you need to look out for. So I think it becomes critical from that perspective, because it saves you from making some of the mistakes that you would have made yourself, right? Because I think they say a wise person doesn't actually have to make all the mistakes themselves. They can actually learn from the mistakes of others. So I think who best to give you that guidance than those that have actually made the mistakes before you. So I really think that becomes therefore critical to actually find someone who has walked the road before, because then they are going to give you the perspective from an experiential perspective, versus from a theoretical perspective.
Absolutely. And Professor Gray?
There's formal and informal mentorship. And the informal mentorship for me is catalytic. And those are, there has to be chemistry and hope and belief between both the mentee and the mentor. And the informal mentorship for me has been much more profound than formal mentorship, because sometimes that's a bit contrived and it may have less less value, but also essential. And so I think what you're looking for in your mentor is some kind of, obviously you have to have a non-judgmental and chemistry and a commitment of both the mentor to the mentee and the mentee to the mentor. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And also to accept the input and the sounding board of a mentor is very critical. Sometimes it's hard to take criticism, and we have to learn all the time that sometimes that's in the best interest of the person that you're mentoring, and vice versa. So I think for me, it's a more organic, intuitive process, particularly the informal mentorship. But formal mentorship is also important because there's usually a good contract between the mentee and the mentor, which you agree upon and work on. And sometimes that can also flourish in the same way as informal mentorship has to happen. But these are difficult things. Mentorship and being mentored are difficult things, but it's critical to our growth, very critical to the way we navigate our careers and our decisions that we make, and never to be underestimated at all. Mentors are critical to our ability to flourish in a way that we could never do by ourselves.
So here's a question from Jackie. Jackie Floramonti extends this and says, mentorship is a big responsibility. As we're asking people to make this pledge today as part of the Guinness World Record, Jackie first says, mentorship is a big responsibility. How do you know if you can add value to the life of your mentee? Prof?
I don't think you ever know that. I think sometimes it's hard to know that, but I think it has to be commitment. So I think first and foremost, you have to commit to that relationship, and you have to, spend time, create opportunities, and be a good sounding board for them. For me, mentoring is also about as a woman, we find it difficult, the networking that men have, women haven't had. We don't spend our lives on golf courses and within gentlemen's clubs. A lot of the time when we're not at work, we're paying attention to our family, and the kind of connections that men had from their schools, from their universities, from their sports events, women don't have. So for me, one of the most important thing about mentoring is actually to have created networks for women, and networks for opportunity that women don't traditionally have, because we don't have those kind of systems that men have. And so part of mentoring also has been to learn how men do it, and how men succeed and how men help other men, so that we can help other women as well and create our own sustainable networking that may not be the traditional, the networking that men have. But I do believe that women have a lot to learn from men. And I think I think we also have to understand that our networking is going to be different, but at the same time powerful and important. And I've seen the power of female networking. I've seen women flourish. And what we have to do as well as women is to create those networks so that other women can flourish with us as well. And that's critical. And it's a little bit different to the way men network, but equally powerful and equally important.
Great. Barry, here's another question for you. It says, this question is for Barry Schwartzberg. What is the best advice you can give to help plan your career rather than simply work to keep your job, besides the right attitude?
So can I just say something about earlier about experience? I remember a quote recently from someone said, good decisions come from experience, but experience comes from making bad decisions. In order to get there. Anyway, so that's just something to think about. So I find, people, I've only worked in sort of large organizations. I have, been quite entrepreneurial within a large organization, but my career has always been in a corporate environment. I find people get intimidated by the corporation often, the size, the age of the company, the assets, you know, the endeavor of the organization. And people get intimidated and don't take advantage of what a company's got to offer. You know, a company can offer so many things. It's got great people, it's got assets, it's got access to capital, it's, you know, phenomenal thinking within an organization. People need to think differently about an organization when they work in a large company. You know, they shouldn't be intimidated by it, but it should be actually an environment where you can be leveraged and grow and develop. So my advice to anyone working inside a large corporation is, you know, be free, you know, be liberated. Try and come up with new ideas. Don't be intimidated, you know, rather take the bull by the horns and come up with sort of innovative ideas and push those ideas and, you know, work for the benefit of the company. You know, don't come there with the attitude that it's 9 to 5 and that's it, it's a job, etc. You've got to have the right attitude to grow, to grow the business. You want the business to do well. First of all, get the business to do well, and then you do well. You know, it's not the other way around. Often, I think people are trying to manage their careers. It's not about managing your career. It's about trying to make the organization do well. And then, obviously, the result of which you'll flourish. So, in my mind, people need to take advantage of the opportunities within a large organization, and you know, and their careers will grow. It's a kind of the right attitude. You always see in a company, good people do bubble up to the surface. There's no doubt in my mind that great people have got the best interests of the organization at heart and growing things and doing well and etc. Move up in the organization quite quickly.
Right. Some more questions. Busi, here's one directed to you from Catherine Makubani, and she says, Busi, to get to where you are, what was your most defining or the most defining moment in your career?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I think I've always been a perpetual learner, and Catherine, and I've made it my business to actually learn as much as I can outside of my specific job profile, you know, and learn as much as I can about the business and about the environment that I actually found myself in, you know. So I think having taken that interest has really propelled me to greater heights, you know, as it were. And I think I'm a firm believer that you can do everything with the right attitude, as it were, you know. And I think that right attitude of wanting to know more, of wanting to learn more, you know, of taking an interest of aspects that are even outside my actual job span, as it were, I think have really made me to take up the opportunities that were available, you know, in the organization when they became available, because then I knew more. I knew what was actually required to actually be successful in that role, you know. So I think that really best positioned me, you know. But I think studying is also critical, as much as it is difficult, you know, to actually continue to study while you're working. But I think it's actually very critical, especially if you aim to actually be in the C-suite someday, you know, because then your experience can only get you so far. You know, you need to actually understand the fundamentals, you know, that can actually be taught by academia, as it were. And when all is said and done, when you are applying for that higher position, you know, the company is going to look at that. You can be 20 years in the organization, but if you don't have, you know, the right qualifications to can actually support you being in that role, then you actually fall short, as it were, you know. So I think that notion of being a perpetual learner, both, you know, formally and informally, is actually an important one, you know, for all of us to continue doing. It's not just for going up the corporate ranks, but I think it's for your own personal development as well, you know, and I think that is a brilliant thing to continue to do.
Yes. Study, lifelong learning. Lifelong learning seems to be the way to cope with what's coming with an uncertain future as well. So there are lots of questions and I want to squeeze as many in as possible. And as you can hear, the themes are so varied from what our delegates are choosing to ask. Very detailed questions about mentorship as well. But Professor Gray, here's a question. It says, what do you think can be done to encourage girls into science? And outstanding women in the sciences, by outstanding women in the sciences like you?
I think it's first of all to believe that you can do maths and science, because I think a lot of women and a lot of girl children are not encouraged to do science at school, or not encouraged to do maths. And so I think it's the way we treat girl children at school. And I was lucky because I had a physics teacher, and the first test I did, I got 70, and I thought that was a good mark. And he said, that's not good enough for you. I want better. And I thought, gee, yes, someone who believes in me. And the next test was 80. And he said, not good enough. And then the next test was 90. And so to have someone, you know, so I would have settled for 70. And he didn't let me settle. And so I think we have to see the spark in girl children, and we mustn't let them settle. Because if they settle at school, they will never get to believe in themselves as scientists. So I think the way we teach girl children is important, and we also have to see their spark and see their spirit, and as teachers nurture that to make sure that they can flourish. Girls respond differently to teaching as boys, and they always are less confident, and so we have to address the whole issue around gender and how teachers treat boys and girls differently in a classroom. So I think those are the important things. And the second thing, obviously, is to make sure that girls understand that there is value in science, and that they can have a productive life. There is a lot of issues in science. There's a lot of gender issues and race issues. We do need to decolonize science and the way we manage science in South Africa. So we have to address the gender inequalities as well as the race inequalities in science, which is something the MRC has been driving a whole transformation of the science agenda to make sure that we can include rural people, historically disadvantaged institutions, and address the whole issue of gender and race, and create opportunities for people to enter science when they never had the opportunities before.
Wonderful. Now, here's a very rather serious question, and it says, as a leader of people, I find that during this pandemic, mentally, I have not been as psychologically strong, and yet it is my job to provide psychological safety to my team members. How do your panelists go about achieving this, especially Barry, after he mentioned kindness and compassion earlier on? Barry?
Oh, look, as I said, I think everyone is going through a tough time. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, it's difficult. People have gone through personal crises. Family members have been affected and unfortunately passed away. So it really has impacted everyone. No one is immune from this pandemic. And first of all, you recognize that. We're all human, the leaders, the people, everyone is just, people. So everyone's been affected. So that's the first thing to recognize, that this is a common affliction. So everyone's going through a tough time. I can't say, listen, you the leader, you got to show strength, etc., etc. I'm not like that. I think, if you it's, as I said, leadership for me is about the debate. It's about creating the right environment. It's about, that's the right thing for me. It's not about strong decision making and all these kinds of things. I don't see leadership as that. It's more like, you're serving the people that you work with, and it's position amongst your team. One person leads, other people do that. It's just one of the positions, right? Running the team. So I think, first of all, you got to show your vulnerability. You can't just be that stoic individual. I don't think it's genuine, So I think you got to show your vulnerabilities. You got to be who you are. You got to, you got to be real. And And as I said, I think everyone's going through a tough time. So, you know, and I think you need external, and you got to talk to experts. You know, you can't be thinking you can assist your people that you work with. You got to get experts involved. You know, people that have done it, know what's going on, etc. You know, so I think you can assist in a way, but you got to get people that know how to deal with these issues. You know, involved in assisting your people in your team.
Right. Does anybody else want to comment on this question?
And I think you said it is about showing your vulnerability, but also I think it's also about some practical things. You know, get up, get dressed, put some makeup on, and you know, and put your Zoom picture on so people can see you, and understand that like your team, you're also having to deal, if you're working from home, with children and doorbells ringing and lawnmowers going, and so that we're all vulnerable, we're all in it together, and to treat and to get, also if you feel you're feeling there's mental health issues, is to get your coach, get the wellness program, talk to your peers about how you're feeling. There's a lot of depression, a lot of mental health issues about this isolation, uncertainty, your family, your friends. You know, you face your friends dying, your family dying, your staff dying as well. So I think there's a lot of mental issues in this pandemic that we shouldn't overlook. And you as a leader need to take care of yourself, because if you're not taking care of yourself, then you won't be able to take care of your team. So get help, go and see coaches, and debrief with people about your mental health issues. It's normal to feel like you do.
It's normal. Mm-hmm. If you don't want to jump in, if you would like, as we wrap. I just thought it was such quite a personal question, an important one for the crisis that we face.
Yeah, so I think the consultativeness is critical, you know, because I think you will realize that you are not the only one going through this. So I think as much as this time requires for us to show strength, you know, but don't show too much strength to your detriment, you know, because when all is said and done, you know, you are also just as affected as the next person. So I think also, you know, showing that vulnerable side as well, allowing yourself to be human, you know, as a leader during this time is also actually critical. It doesn't take away your decisiveness, you know, it doesn't take away the fact that you are at the helm and you actually have to give direction and whatever the case is. But I think allowing yourself to acknowledge, you know, that I too am impacted. I too am actually very self-critical about what the next step ought to be, you know, because maybe in talking to the next person, you will actually work through your own doubt that you have about whatever decision that you actually have to implement, and you can therefore find the best solution, you know, that you actually have to implement during this time. So yeah, be human first and foremost before being a leader.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think all of you have shared really incredible words. And my final question is, you know, what has the crisis taught you about the people that you work with? Are there new insights, new appreciation for the teams that you have around you?
Their commitment, their ability to ride the storm with you, and to get up and do the stuff that you ask them to do. And so I've learned that my team are better than me, stronger than me, and if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be where I am.
Thank you. Busi?
So I think communication, I think, has come out as a very critical lesson during this time. You know, I think we underestimate the fact that in contact sessions or in working with people every day, you therefore inadvertently, because you share the same space, the same environment, it's easy, to probably maybe talk about everything and anything, and to actually be more communicative than you would be when you're actually behind a computer screen. So I don't think that being behind computer screens need to actually take away that communication element. Actually, it becomes more critical and more important during this time, because when we are quiet, it brings about uncertainty. People don't know what you're thinking. They don't know what the next step is going to be. They don't know what's going to happen. Even when the communication means, we are going to build this plane while we're flying it. I also don't have all the answers, so they actually need to actually understand, that headspace that you actually find yourself in. Because in the absence of communicating, they are thinking decisions have been made, but you are actually just sitting and choosing not to communicate them. So communication has been very critical as well.
Mm-hmm. And Barry, tell us about your team and what you've discovered and learned about them.
Well, a lot of my contact with the outside world with people, and I love people. I love being with people. I love talking to people. And so a lot of my sort of interactions have been with people I work with in the main, So, I'm spending 8 to 10 hours a day on Zoom calls and team calls, talking to people. And, I've learned a lot from them. I've enjoyed interacting with them. It's actually in some instances, the relationships have grown stronger during this process. I think we've worked well. Generally, we've all recognized, obviously, the problems that we're in and the difficulty of this environment and of being isolated. And so I think generally people have worked well together. They've gelled, haven't been as sort of tough on each other as they typically would be in a normal environment. I think there has been some understanding. So I think gelling as a team, we've actually gelled pretty well, even though times have been quite tough.
Yeah. We've got thank yous coming in on the chat function. Janet Bloom, for instance, says, thank you so much for a fabulous session. It was very insightful. I want to thank our panel, and that was Barry Schwartzberg, joining us, of course, representing Discovery Vitality Group. We have Professor Glenda Gray as one of our panelists, and we are all familiar with the role that she's played as the CEO of the South African Medical Research Council, and of course being the chair of, or rather contributing her experience and advising the Minister of Health as part of the National Coronavirus Command Council. Busisiwe Mavuso completing that panel, and of course we're familiar with her from her role as the Chief Executive Officer at BLSA. Thank you so much to all three of you. So many insights, useful insights on navigating crisis, on leading through crisis, and of course on innovating through what may be unfamiliar and uncertain times. Thank you so much to our panelists and for the gems that you have shared with us. I made a few notes of things that stood out for me when Professor Gray said, for instance, that it's important that you not be scared. Do not be scared. Do the impossible. Do the impossible. And I thought that's enough to give wings to anyone who's faced with a challenge and is uncertain or is experiencing doubt as to how to proceed. Love the challenge, relish the challenge, and think on your feet as a leader. Never say never. You need a team, so extend your hand to get help from others. And also, you will make lots of mistakes along the way. Have grace for yourself, because mistakes are part of the learnings. And whatever you knew yesterday, whatever was the truth yesterday, might not be the truth today. So accept that that's how things may have to be. Busisiwe, of course, also shared some incredible nuggets that saying that it starts with that internal work. To believe that you can be a leader starts with that internal work, with that internal belief. You need to make the mindset shift, and often it starts in our homes. Changing the gender dynamics in the society starts at home. And when it comes to crisis, remember that you are human, lean on your human qualities to be able to connect with others, and that vulnerability is your friend. And of course, some of the gems that have been dropped by Barry is that kind leadership that embodies empathy, that seeks to understand people is the way to go. You need to up your communication, talk to people, focus, be a bit more focused. Less is more under circumstances such as this, especially around innovation, more collaboration, and also public-private partnerships are more about interdependence. And be positive about the future. Thank you so much. I don't know what notes you took, but these are my standouts for today. So as we conclude, I just want to remind you that Discovery is on a mission to establish a Guinness World Record for the greatest number of people dialed into a leadership coaching session. And we could set the world record within the next 24 hours. We are close to 2 hours into this deadline. So make sure you make your pledge, commit to pay it forward, and mentor someone in your individual capacity. Make that pledge. And remember, as leaders, you can influence others in a way that builds them up, that encourages and edifies them so that they can duplicate this attitude in others as they go on to pay it forward. Thank you so much for tuning in and being part of this session. But it doesn't end here, because this is a week-long session. There are lots of highlights with lots of masterclasses that you can curate for your weekly program. Highlights like the digital migration, fundraising and brand positioning strategies, as well as harnessing human potential and collaboration and partnership. Those are just some of the highlights coming up in this week. Important learnings on the way. Thank you so much for joining us as we kick off a week of mentorship with purpose. Thank you.